Hi everyone, thank you Julian for the very generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be here, even if somewhat nerve-wracking. There's rather a lot of you. So they say there's only one thing in life that's for certain. Two things in life that's for certain. That's death and taxes. I think we all recognize this, but rarely we truly appreciate it. And the following statistics hopefully might remind you of this. So 700,000 people each year across England and Wales attend A&E departments with a head injury. Therefore, statistically, within a year, 6% of the people in this room, so that's just over 20 people, will have suffered a head injury of some kind. Within 10 years, 10% of the people in this room, so roughly 40 people, will have suffered a major head injury. And within our lifetimes, there will have been 2 fatalities due to head injury. So if you haven't considered this, how common this is, please consider it now, because this will become more relevant again later. So for now, I would like to take you back a few years to talk about my childhood briefly. I haven't got a clicker. Sorry. Thank you very much. I forgot to bring it on. Right, I think. There we go. So there's some pictures embarrassing pictures of me when I was younger. For the sake of this talk, I'm going to call the younger me Stephen 1.0, and this will become clearer later. So as a young boy, I was frequently described as energetic, sometimes too energetic, ambitious, and certainly enthusiastic. I always wanted to achieve new records and do things that no one else had done before. I won my first ever chess competition and became national under-8 champion when I was 7. And was the first person to win a point at the British Championships from Gibraltar. Age 10, I won 2 British titles, under 12 rapid play champion and under 120 adult champion. Age 12, I got my black belt in Taekwondo, and at the age 13, I won the GBC Sports Personality of the Year, junior section. When I was 14, however, I got a really massive opportunity to play former world number 5, and at the time he was current Spanish number 1, Paco Vallejo Pons, in a simultaneous match. After a really long game, I think it was about 3.5 hours, which is long for a simultaneous, I was the last man standing, and I managed to register my first win against the Grandmaster, and astonished Stephen 1.0 was very happy with himself. From the ages 12 to 18, I played in European and World Youth Championships for chess, as well as winning a rating prize at the Senior Commonwealth, also for chess. I believe I've forgotten to click this again, but there's some more embarrassing pictures. There we go. Right. So this picture of me at the Sports Awards. I also gave the opening address at the 100th British Chess Championship, which was slightly less people than there are here today, so slightly less nerve-wracking. I then, at the World and European Championships, I got to play some really great players, but in 2015 was probably the highlight. I played, so this was against Paco Vallejo Pons, sorry, and there we go. Right. So I got to play against the European number 1. As pictured here, you probably can't see me. There's quite a few people. But I played for 7 hours, and as you can see here, even the arbiters got bored and left us to it. So I eventually painstakingly lost after 7 hours, but it was a huge experience for me. So now you have an idea of what Stephen 1.0 was like. I'd like to move on. I'm going to jump to September 2017. I was beginning my year 13 year, my final year at school, or so I thought it would be. And Stephen 1.0 had set himself up for some very, very ambitious goals this time. I wanted to improve my grades to A-star AA, as I wanted to apply to medical school. I wanted to pass my medical entrance exam, which was in a couple of weeks. I aimed to achieve a top 5 finish in a major open called the Guernsey Chess Open. and I wanted to move towards being selected for the GBR team for fencing. Now I'm going to jump again to the 1st of November, where I had miraculously achieved all of these goals. I'm not quite sure how, but through some determination and quite a bit of luck, I got there. It was early in the morning, and I was preparing for my Oxford entrance exam, stressing and fretting over the potential outcome of the exam. As a typical student, I had, of course, left it to the last minute to study. Little did I know that this would probably be one of the most significant days of my life, but for very different reasons. In the morning, I was asked as an Oxbridge applicant to give a talk on something that interested me in my chosen course. And so I chose the cognitive effects of brain injury, as 20 years previously, my father had suffered 2 severe head injuries himself, and the topic had always intrigued me. So a couple of hours later, I was at fencing training, as I usually did on a Wednesday. The first session passed as per normal, and then came the warm-up for the second session. In a game of dodgeball, aimed at hand-eye coordination, I jumped for a ball, and unfortunately, without seeing me, so did a friend of mine. The result was an elbow to my right temple, and I was knocked unconscious briefly. This brings me to Stephen 2.0. So, I didn't know at the time. I was adamant that I was perfectly fine, but I had suffered a severe concussion. I got up and insisted to everyone that I was fine. Carried on training for about 20 minutes before I collapsed onto the person next to me. Eventually, I went home, and my mum called 111, which is like a 999 service, but for non-emergencies. And I went to hospital, and they diagnosed me with a simple concussion. Stay in bed for 3 days, don't do anything, you'll be fine at the end of it, but certainly don't sit your exam. I was determined to sit my exam. I went to bed, fully intending to wake up in time, even though it was only 5 hours away, to sit my exam. I didn't wake up for about the next day and a half, and when I did, I was still a bit delirious. So after 5 days, I should have been recovering well. I should have been up and about, talking normally. But on the 5th day, when my mum went to wake me up, I still wasn't speaking properly. I didn't know where I was. At one point, I told her to leave me alone because I was 40 and had 3 children. Yeah, so I wasn't really with it, one could say. And I was sent to hospital again when they ran tests, and I was later diagnosed with something called post-concussion syndrome. Now, post-concussion syndrome is very unknown to the medical world, as in it's known, but it's not very well understood. So they say that it could take between 6 months and 2 years to recuperate, which is obviously quite a big window. I'm currently 1 year and 3 months in, and still experience problems. So I was going to kind of briefly go through that. But before I do, just to kind of recap, in that moment, although I hadn't realized it, I lost the chance to sit my exams that year. I was unable to play competitive chess for a full year, and fencing took me a long time to get back to. In the words of John Lennon, life is something that happens when you're busy making plans. So, post-concussion syndrome. There we go. Right, so there are 3 main areas, physical, emotional, and behavioral, and cognitive. And there's about 20 symptoms that are associated with post-concussion syndrome for every one of these. But just some of them for me were headaches. Headaches. I had light and noise sensitivity. I couldn't balance properly as well. I had severe problems with walking for the first, say, month. Cognitively, I had concentration problems, which was something very new to me as a chess player from a young age. I had issues with processing information. I couldn't find words properly. I had diminished mental and physical perception. Emotionally and behaviorally, I became very irritable and anxious all the time. Had small bouts of depression and sudden outbursts of emotion that were kind of unexplainable. So my personality really changed in that short space of time, which is not only difficult for me to come to terms with, but also the people supporting you. So I was lucky that with fencing, it didn't significantly impact my mental fatigue. So fatigue was a huge problem for me. But because fencing was more physically fatiguing than mentally, I was able to do that sooner than I was, for example, play chess or study. So I really used fencing as a way to recuperate. Okay, just before I get to that, I'd like to run a brief experiment on you all. So I'm going to show a sentence. I'd like to kind of show you how word finding difficulties can affect someone. Okay, so here's a sentence. There's a sentence. Okay, now in a second, one of these words is going to come up highlighted in red. Okay, and I'd like you all to try and think. I'm not going to ask you, but I'd like you all to try and think of an alternative word to this word when I press this button. Okay, so a few of you would have very quickly come up with maybe the word boxers or something, which can very easily be substituted into a sentence whilst you're talking. What colour is my underwear? Oh no, I can't think of the word underwear, I'll say boxers. That's fine. Now, here's another sentence. I'm going to do the same thing, and I think you may or may not struggle a little bit more, but please could you put your hand up if you feel brave enough to volunteer an alternative? Okay, fine. Yeah, okay, thank you. So I would say that took about 10 seconds. Now I'm going to try that. This is 2. I'm going to skip the rest of the 5 seconds because it becomes awkward. Now try having a conversation when all the time you're coming up with words like these and you can't express yourself. That's kind of how a conversation goes with someone with post-concussion syndrome, at least for me it did for the first 2 or 3 months. And even now sometimes I find it difficult. So back to fencing. This really helped me. I don't know why that's there. There we go. Okay, fencing. Having a focus really helped as well because it felt like I kind of had control of at least some part of my life. I trained very hard until I left school at the end of the year. I wasn't able to sit my exams because I still wasn't well enough to achieve any kind of a grade that was close to what I was predicted. And along came the summer, and with it came the Commonwealth Fencing Championships. I arrived early to the event and watched some of my friends compete in the other sections. But unfortunately, 36 hours before my event, I got food poisoning. I was in bed until the hour of my competition and somehow managed to haul myself to the arena and fence. With breaks in between hits because I was still quite ill and a huge amount of determination and quite a lot of water, I managed to win my first international fight, as this was my first international competition, and give a relatively average international performance. I imagine most people would have been quite satisfied with this. I probably should have been. But most people would have enjoyed spectating the rest of the events. But for the first time since my accident, I think this experience really kind of sparked something of the Stephen 1.0. I went to the organisers keen to compete again in the team event 2 days later, despite the fact I didn't have a team. I came up with the idea of having 6 fencers from 6 different countries, all fencing for the love of the sport, effectively. They hugely encouraged the idea, and I was very grateful, and they agreed to put us on the semi-finals piste and on live stream, as long as I could organise it by myself and get everyone together to do it. Over the next 24 hours, I frantically ran around and ensured that I had the best fencers from countries such as Australia and Canada agreeing to fence in the match. To my surprise, the event came together and the match went ahead. Okay, so this is the match. I later, at one point in this match, found myself 30-28 down, with my Commonwealth experience being very close to over when we reach 35 hits. Before long, I was 34-30 down, And moments away from defeat, at this point, stressed and feeling that I had blown my chances, something really extraordinary happened. I suddenly somehow felt calm and happy. I'd realized that this could be my last ever hit in a Commonwealth Games. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy it. And so, and this quote popped into my head. Sorry. Somewhere behind the athlete you've become and the hours of practice and the coaches who have pushed you is a little boy who fell in love with the game and never looked back. You should always play for him. And so I did. Suddenly I was this young boy that I used to be who simply was playing because he loved the game. I like to call this a flow state, which I came up with a term with a neuropsychologist I was seeing, where it's a mental state where you're under immense pressure, but somehow you manage to find control simply by believing that you can do whatever you want to and enjoy it. 34-31, 34-32, etc., etc. And every hit, this could have been my last hit. On the final hit, the referee had to check the video replay at 34 all to see who'd won the hit, and it felt like the longest 20 seconds of my life. He came back to the piste and awarded me the point, meaning although I had not yet realized it, I'd won the most hits of all the 6 fencers. Later at the prize giving, they awarded me a gold medal for determination and resilience shown in the event, along with my performance, captaining the winning side and winning the most hits. To finish up, I think, if I can get the right paper, there we go. I'm now Stephen 3.0. I'm not the person that I was before my accident, Stephen 1.0, and I'm not the person I was straight after my accident, Stephen 2.0. I can't change this, it's happened, and that's that. I'm a new version of me, the same way that tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, you and I alike will be new versions of ourselves over and over again. I will finally conclude completely in a second and stop rambling on, but if anyone has any inquiries about what I've talked about with head injuries or anything else, please feel free to contact me. I hope that today what I've talked about has raised some awareness on the provenance and severity of head injuries, and how I've learnt the importance of not giving up even when you're at rock bottom. You don't know what you're capable of until you have to be. You aren't always going to achieve your goals either. You will fail many times at various points in your life and in various aspects of it. But if you keep going, believe in yourself, and never lose sight of your goals, what seems impossible soon becomes possible. I'd like to thank my parents and Mara Garcia, my first coach, and Roger Stenterford, my first sponsor, who unfortunately passed away recently. Without all of those guys, and particularly my parents, I really wouldn't have got this far. Every person in this room is capable of being the best person they can be, because really, if I can do it, anyone can.